I love cartoons. Right when the credits started rolling, my brother told me that this movie reminded him of Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, and I immediately said, it's absolutely nothing like that movie. For reference, Scott Pilgrim and Baby Driver were two movies that I heard hyped up for years. People kept saying they were so stylized it was like watching a video game or comic book. But when I actually got to see those movies, I was disappointed by them. They didn't meet what I was expecting from the hype. Spider-Verse, on the other hand, met and exceeded my expectations. And I think a big difference between these movies is that Spider-Verse is animated. You can try to be a comic book in live action, but in animation you can be a comic book and more. And that's exactly what this movie does. The style is so strong and it really feels like something totally new, and I never thought I would see that from a mainstream animation. Most CG animated movies feel the same. They could be bouncy and extremely beautiful, but I don't think I've ever seen a CG movie with this much of a unique style. You'd expect to see a unique style from some art house film with a depressing plot or incomprehensible surrealism, but Spider-Verse is a high-octane, comedy-filled Spider-Man action movie that looks and feels incredibly unique. If this movie reminded me of anything, it was Danganronpa, which is just about my favorite video game series ever. While that game visually focuses on the flat and still frame aspect of manga and comics, Spider-Verse tries to convert that flat stillness to 3D space and movement. For the first maybe minute of the movie I was turned off by the Juddery Animation, but you get used to it real quickly, and eventually fall in love with it. The coloring, framing, and choreography are really what makes this animation style work. There's so many amazing shots. There are a lot of well-framed cuts, and some parts with realistic sort of shaky cam movement, and there are also a lot of continuous shots that swing the camera around all over the place in ways you couldn't do in live action. I loved these shots, and they really help add to the high-energy, stylized feel this movie's going for. There were so many shots I saw and thought that would make an awesome wallpaper. And a lot of those were actually some really brief shots, but just about every frame in this movie is something cool to look at. You can watch this movie with the sound off and be entertained just by the visuals, but then of course you'd be missing out on the great comedy and characters. In the past 20 years there's been like 8 movies featuring Spider-Man, and to me they usually feel fresh and separate, but Spider-Verse is a completely new thing to me. The focus on Miles and sort of mentor relationship between him and deadbeat alternate Peter Parker felt like a really fresh story. Spider-Man is so popular because there's so much you can do with him. Each Spider-Man is very different, even if they have the same origin. I think a major reason for that is how he's just some dude. In this movie more than any other illustrates that. Miles just feels so genuine. Like there are some scenes where he gets really nervous and you just feel like you're watching an actual kid go through this stuff. Spider-Man could be so many different things because he's not a god or a millionaire, he's just some guy from New York. Or girl from New York. Or pig from New York. There's a lot you could do with this character's simple formula, and if the comic books were allowed to do it, the movie should do it too. It's really meta how that's actually like the plot of this whole movie. You can kinda tell where the story is going, but there are quite a few twists I didn't expect. This movie is actually pretty dang dark and intense for something that's PG rated, but that's all the more reason to love it. You almost never get this type of story and action in Western animation. There are a few times where the movie shifts from action to emotional moments, and since the action is so good, those slow moments sort of feel like interruptions, even though they're highly important for the story. The film's also got a great moral about trying new things, and the way the story and characters express that moral actually kinda got to me. Aside from the visual art, the soundtrack is amazing too. Plenty of energetic songs that really help you get immersed in the action and emotion of the characters. My only problem with this movie was the lack of focus on the side characters. I thought they'd be a bit more important, but they're mostly just plot devices from a story perspective. Some amazing visuals and comedy comes from them, but you just don't see them enough. You don't really feel for them the way you feel for Miles and Peter. The writers probably didn't want to cram too much into the movie, but if there's a sequel, I would love to see these guys get more focus. And that's mostly everything I have to say. I mean, I could keep going, but you know by now this movie is something spectacular. Everyone should check out this movie, even if you're not too big into superheroes. It's a fun, fast, and stylish adventure with a nice amount of genuine heart and emotion, really unlike anything I've ever seen. So I hope you check it out if you're interested. Support for this movie is actually support for more super unique, high-budget animated movies, and that is definitely something we need more of. Also stay for the credits, there's a pretty good scene after them. If you've seen the movie, let me know what you thought in the comments. It really gets you thinking though, are there alternate dimensions in real life? Is there some alternate version of me who hates this movie? Is his name like Hatted Monster or something? That'd be weird. Does that mean, is there an anime girl version of me somewhere?